Young adult books often get dismissed as less serious. What do you wish more adults understood about the purpose and impact of young adult literature?
Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about why I write specifically young adult literature, and I think that'll help, and why a lot of other people that I've talked to write for it. I think that'll answer the question. Is I write specifically for that audience because it is a time of such incredible inner discovery and coming into a sense of yourself and your power. And that being able to reach readers at that time in their life has really long lasting implications, right? And I think that adults can forget sometimes that when they were 17, 18 years old, I mean, they understood and had a lot of the same feelings, emotions about things. It's not like these kids, like, they're still kids, yes, but they're right on the brink of adulthood and they're dealing with major issues. Some of them are dealing with more horrible circumstances than some adults, and so the idea that young adult literature doesn't tackle real complex problems, even if it's kind of slantwise, even if it's through, something like, if we think of the Hunger Games, that series, which took on, fascism and the overthrowing of a regime through this kind of exciting adventure fantasy. It's books like that are still dealing with complex, important issues, and they are getting people to read them, even more importantly. And so I do think too, a lot of people only think that YA literature, like when you say that, they only think of oh, Hunger Games, oh, Twilight, oh, these big kind of fantasy series. And that's not the case at all. There's a lot of beautiful contemporary literature written by, and literature of all genres, written by incredibly talented authors who prefer and very much on purpose write for the YA audience.
Why do you think young adult stories resonate so deeply in an era defined by crisis and uncertainty?
Yeah, this is an excellent question. Well, I think that YA stories, no matter what they're about, no matter what genre they're written, horror, sci-fi, contemporary, there is always that coming of age element, right? That is kind of that's part of what defines a YA story, as well as having a YA protagonist. And anytime, any coming of age stories, that is a crisis, right? You're going through a crisis of self. And I also just want to add too that it doesn't stop after, you don't just become an adult and then you have all the answers figured out, right? I think one of the reasons why it also appeals to a wider audience, to adult readers too, is that we're constantly growing into new versions of ourselves. And so we can identify constantly with the idea of figuring out who we are coming into a new identity. But certainly with everything, with the multi-crisis world that we're living in right now, things are pretty bleak. I mean, it's difficult for anyone to say otherwise, on multiple levels. And YA literature specifically is focusing on stories in which it's essentially life or death for the main character. Even if it's not actually life or death, it feels that way because that is how everything feels to a teenager. You've got all these hormones mixing up with all these identity, you're becoming your own person. You're maybe fighting with your family. You're figuring out friendships, things. There's all of these complex things that really serve as almost archetypes for larger societal things, like the way that we have to get along with people across the aisle from us, right? Who maybe have different ways of thinking that we do, but we need to figure out how to work with those people if we're going to solve really important world problems. And so that's why I think it appeals not just to young adults, but also young adult literature appeals to a lot of adults right now, too.
Young adult readers are in an identity-forming stage. often searching for belonging and meaning. What gives you hope about this generation of readers?
Yeah, well, I think part of being that age, and another reason that I love writing for people that age, is that they haven't been alive long enough to be jaded, and they're much more open to other ideas and other ways of thinking and ways of being in the world. And so and I think people will say, oh, there's always been crises of one sort or another, and people are always idealistic and they come along. But you think about the people that really do change the world, like they were teenagers, like they grew up in whatever era they grew up, and had to have that hope, had to have that determination they were going to make a difference, that they were going to create or help co-create the world in which they want to live. And so it gives me hope for this current generation, because climate specifically is such a huge concern for so many young people. It's impacting everything. It's impacting jobs. It's impacting, socioeconomics. People can't get houses as easily. It's just all of these fundamental things have to be confronted because of the climate crisis and because there's so many people invested. And that's one of the reasons, we can talk about too, that like I put Onward together, but it can be really difficult to do hard work, mentally draining, emotionally draining work, coming up against barriers constantly and keeping that hope. And also, like, there has to be more than hope too, right? We have to have ways that we can go beyond hope and actually start making solutions. And I think there's just something about being so hungry for life, which is another thing that I love about so many YA protagonists. And I remember that feeling too of as a young adult, of just being so hungry to figure out, like, why am I here? What's my purpose? How can I make the world a better place? And I think that's a real universal feeling among young people, and certainly the young adults that I speak to today. And so that does give me a lot of hope, even on days when it can feel really overwhelming.
What can educators and librarians do to support and protect access to young adult literature that challenges norms or discomforts authority?
Yeah, so educators, librarians, they're on the front lines, really. They have to go up against gatekeepers. They're now having to go up against parents that haven't even read books, or, certainly don't have degrees of library science or degrees in education. And I think the most important thing is to find other people that are going through it too. Find your community, make sure that you're taking care of your own mental health, because you're very much putting yourself on the front lines, and a lot of people are concerned about their jobs. I totally understand that. And they're sticking up for what they believe is freedom, right? The right to read stories, the right not to be told that they can't give certain books to children or to young adults, books that would really make those kids' lives better. In a lot of cases, and honestly, it would make the world better, because a lot of those books are giving empathy, and we're seriously lacking that. So I think that I just want to say that we as authors, like, we see you, we know how vital and important you are. And I mean, we are 100% behind you. Thank you for everything that you're doing, and please keep doing it. And please do take care of yourself and your mental health. Do take some breaks. Do have someone that you can check in with, because it's really hard, challenging work.
If there's one thing you'd like educators, parents, or policymakers to understand about the power of young adult literature, what would it be?
I would like them to understand that a great story is a great story. And so it doesn't matter like who specifically it's written for, right? We read all kinds of stories. And YA literature specifically has the power to reach even more people than really literature written specifically for adults, because it's written for younger readers as a target audience. But if it's done well, it's going to be loved and enjoyed by adults too. And I mean, like, I was just invited, just to give you a real quick example, a couple weeks ago, I was invited to a book club that had read, it was an adult book club, but they had read The Edge of Anything, which is my first novel, and it's a YA novel. And it was so interesting. So they invited me to come talk with them. And there were people that already knew that they liked YA literature and, you know, were excited, but I could not get over the amount of people that were like, I've never read a story like this. And I just felt everything. I just loved it. I just connected. It was so powerful, you know? And of course, like, on the one hand, like, that's wonderful. Like, it makes me feel great. But I'm also just like, this idea of like, my books aren't the only books that do that. You know, the only YA books that do that, like, that is the power of YA literature. And so really more people can access YA literature because it is so enjoyable too, and accessible. And it's the kind of thing that, you know, if you think about some like highbrow, like if whatever people are like, oh, highbrow literature from the canon, you know, like that's not really the kind of literature that many busy adults are reading, particularly in their busy lives or like right before they go to bed, you know? And so I think if we actually want to change hearts and minds, we have to write books that appeal to people's hearts, right? In order to also appeal to their minds. And I think that is what YA literature does so well. That's why I fell in love with YA literature. I mean, I was an English literature major. Like I thought for a big part of my life, I was going to teach at the college level, that I would be a professor of English literature, of adult books. And I just kept once I discovered kind of young adult literature, I just kept being drawn to those books. And I was like, well, this is so interesting, right? Like, why, like what, like I'm getting kind of the same, like great feelings, great messages, just great commentaries on society, but in like a much more digestible way. And so I think a lot of people can relate to that. And so I think there's a lot of power there that can be tapped into. And that's what I want people to know.
Your new book, Onward, 16 climate fiction short stories to inspire hope, explores the effects of climate change, inspires activism, and cultivates hope for life on Earth now and in the future. How do you balance truth-telling with hope?
Ooh, this is a hard one. This is a very hard one. So one of the ways that we did it in this collection is that they are multi-genre. So the stories range from like, there's some light horror, there's spec and fantasy, and also contemporary realism. And so the way that you're coming at issues, some of them that are set in a dystopian world, you're like, oh, we've gone and done it. Now the earth is, you know, scorched, and here's how we have to leave, you know? And so we're seeing like kind of how would we keep going if we'd gotten to that point, right? Versus the stories that are set today in a contemporary world, dealing with all of the problems and the issues that are happening right now in 2025. And so I think that's one way that we address it, but also the purpose of the book, right? It's not just stories, right? These are fictional stories, but the purpose of the story is to make readers, no matter where they are. So it's written really for people who are completely overwhelmed. Some of these young people and people in their 20s, I'm thinking young adult really until like 30s. Like, some people are just completely overwhelmed and they're like, I can't even deal with what's happening. We're all, you know, it's all terrible. So why should I even care? There's climate apathy. There's really people that have been so privileged that they just still, if they don't believe or aren't watching the news, that they still really can't understand what's happening. And so there's stories for it that have some characters like that too. And so trying to show all perspectives, but then also a vital piece of that was the resource section that we link to in the back. And I love that it lives online because it can always be current, right? And always be updated, because it's more than it's like, yes, let's find a sense of community and connection and be with like-minded people and be like, oh, okay, there's a problem. We need to do something. We need to do something. But so many people are like, well, what? I can't quit school and go start a climate movement. I can't, how can one little person make a difference? I don't have money to spend, or I can't make calls, or whatever. There's so much like, I can't, but there are so many things that people can do. And there's so many movements that are already started that people just can tap into. And that's where offering those resources is a way of giving hope, because it shows people, hey, this is all the stuff that is happening, that is going well. And so I was very, very intent on having that section, because it really is a defining part of the book.
Tell us a little bit about Onward and what you hope readers of all ages take away from this engaging collection.
Yeah, so I am so excited about Onward. So the full title is Onward: 16 Climate Fiction Short Stories to Inspire Hope. And as we talked about before, it has a beautiful resource section that's online, and it's linked in here. There's a QR code. But so these are, there's 16 stories, and I have to say that you never really know what stories you're going to get, right? When you're an anthologist and you ask people to write for you. And these stories blew me away. They tackle so many different parts of the climate crisis, from climate apathy, from climate grief, from dystopian worlds, and, what the future might look like. And they're just so well written, and they're so digestible, right? The short stories are so great for both really busy adults and for really busy teenagers, right? Because there's something so satisfying about being able to finish something. And so it's way easier to sit down and finish a 20-page short story than it is to finish an entire novel, right, in one sitting. And so I think the biggest thing is that there's something for everyone, no matter where you are on your climate journey, even if you're the most fierce activist already, or if you're like, I'm not even sure I believe in this climate change stuff, or you're completely overwhelmed. Like, there is something for everyone. And the stories are just wonderful stories. And I really think that you will think about things in a new way.